Hey everybody, it's Carpo again. Well, I was just going to make a video and talk about some of my harvests this year from my garden, my tobacco and my cannabis harvest as well, but it led me into thinking about being prepared and the reason why I started growing gardens in the first place. Now, given with a small garden you can supply yourself with a small amount of food, but you're limited by the season. You can grow indoors, but of course that requires electricity and you have to weigh the options and whether or not it's worth the space and the time. Anyhow, for the average person, gardening is more of a hobby these days than a necessity. But the reason I've always been interested in gardening is because I like being one with the earth. I enjoy cultivating and planting seeds and watching the plants grow. Even if I don't eat the foods, I'm not a big fan of like peppers, but I like growing them. I don't eat tomatoes, but I like growing them. I started thinking about my tobacco garden. I didn't. This year we had kind of an early frost, so really this was all I got out of my CBD rich plants, and so that's probably just going to go into brownies or something for because I've always enjoyed growing varieties of different varieties of cannabis. One that's just a pure CBD strain, so it's very useful for a lot of people, but I've just pretty much grown it for the joy of it. I grew several different tobacco plants, but I've always grown the Aztec tobacco. The stuff is very strong. I've mentioned it in several videos, but this is what I ended up with. And each one I split into like 30-gram bags, or like 1-ounce bags basically. And it has a really nice smell. And so there's about, 25, 30 different bags. Some of them are better than others, where I have different methods of drying that I tried. So some of them are like these big groups that are all tied together. And this is Mohawk tobacco or traditional ceremonial tobacco, so it's super strong. It's not the kind of stuff that you roll up. But anyhow, the reason why I grew that, besides the fact that it's interesting growing tobacco, was that in a crisis, in a major disaster where have to be self-sufficient for a while, I could actually trade it. It would be a wonderful commodity to trade, because I'm telling you, I'm not a doom and gloomer here, and I'm really trying not to make this video about the apocalypse, right? Anything could happen tomorrow, and there's 1,000 sites. We've all seen the movies where, you're eating out of old cans of fruit in the future, after some apocalypse. Nobody knows what could possibly happen, but knowing how to garden is something that a lot of folks take for granted. They think that you can just throw some seeds in the ground and they'll just grow, and they will. But if you're in a pinch, you want to make sure you get the maximum out. And I can see communities coming together after a major disaster, planting huge backyard gardens, saying, why do we have lawns? Lawns were royalty's way to show they didn't have to garden. That was the whole point of grass, fields, and lawns anyway. So I'm going to go over a few things, very simple things, that you could use besides learning to grow a garden that could help you survive in a major catastrophe, after a major catastrophe, let's say, where you had to be self-sufficient for a long period of time. And I'm going to try to go through these as quick as possible. First off, without a garden, you cannot have a garden without seeds. This is a stockpile seed bank. There's supposedly over 30,000 heirloom seeds in here, hermetically sealed. I bought this maybe 2011 or 12. It says it's good for 4 years, and then the shelf life doubles for every under 65, for every 6 degrees you go down. I keep them out here on the floor in the garage, so there's cold year round. So regardless, just having them, even if you replenish them from time to time. Where would you get seeds for a garden if you had to start growing your own food and there was a catastrophe, right? Well, in the meantime, of course, you're going to need food. And I'm just going to say this, I've had these for like 8 years. These are like freeze-dried strawberries here. And this giant thing I bought, it was like 2011. I bought it just in case. It's an emergency food bank. It's got 23 pounds of dehydrated food in here. It's hefty. It's got all kinds of different foods in there, and it has a 20-year or longer shelf life. I have like 3 or 4 of these things, just in case something happens, because you never know. And it's always just eased my mind to know they're there. Now, the one thing I'm not going to talk about in this prepping video is anything to do with firearms or ammunition. So hopefully people know why. It's one of those things you just don't talk about online anymore, so I'm going to leave it at that. As for some very simple things to have, this book I got at Goodwill for $5. Camping and Wilderness Survival. This book has everything, and if you look in here, you can just see some of the pages. They've got every fish, every knot, every lashing, every different type of shelter you could imagine. First aid, a lot of first aid. Photography, binoculars, compass, maps, how to find star signs, how to determine where you're at, cooking, forest fires, winter travel, directions to go. This is something that anyone could acquire, and something that 100 years ago would just be a godsend. For say pioneers coming over here, in the wagon trains, having a simple manual with, how to build a shelter, or how to avoid the wind, or these animals, or this insect. I cannot state enough. Right now, we think that everything is at our fingertips on Google. If the internet wasn't there, where would you get your information? And with that, I'm going to go through just a few of the technical things, and I want to mention this first. A USB stick. Okay, everybody knows what a USB stick is. It's a simple 32 gigabyte USB stick. Hardly even has any files on it. Honestly, I used this for 200. I downloaded a torrent maybe 8 years ago, and I believe it was called like 230 plus compressed survival manuals and books. And it was, somebody had compiled all of these survival manuals, books, pamphlets, everything you can imagine. It was like 230 plus. And I downloaded the whole file, and then I put it onto several different USB sticks. There's a small adapter for this to hook onto your phone. To think that you could have all the survival you need at your disposal in your back pocket, in your wallet at all times, that all you need is just to use the adapter, plug it right in and go, oh, okay. I mean, right now, I can't say it enough, we take it for granted, having the internet available. Having information like that at your fingertips could be very useful as I drop it. A few more simple things that I just want to go over real quick. One is battery packs, chargers, anything like that, as well as solar panels. Just having simple stuff like that around can be a lifesaver. A simple handheld GPS unit, not a cell phone, but an actual real GPS. This is just a simple old GPS 72 Garmin. May or may not be useful depending on where you live and where you're going and whether you have to travel somewhere. And the last thing is simple ham radio. These are very lightweight, not very powerful. I got them reasonably priced, just so I have access to every channel I could possibly need, so I can listen in on what's going on, listen in on weather, problems like that. Worst case scenario, you'd want a Faraday cage to keep all this stuff in, but I'm not going to go that extreme, because that's a totally different realm. I'm not a prepper. I'm just a person who's prepared. In other words, I've been through the prepping stuff, and I've realized it's kind of a joke, because the ultimate preparedness you can have for whatever might happen is in here. Because you'll laugh when you realize, of course, that whatever eventually happens in your life, and something will happen, it's never what you expect. If you think it's going to come from above, it comes from below, and so on and so forth. So just simply having a few of these things, I think, it makes you feel a little more confident, just in case. But especially the literature, the seeds, and the manuals and know-how, like knowing what you're doing in a time of crisis can be paramount. I think that we've really let ourselves become, too soft in that way. We really expect the paramedics will come save us. Most of us don't know how to do basic first aid. I mean, it's just, I'm just as guilty as anyone else. I should learn how to do a variety of different techniques. I should probably read that book through and through, and just to know, because the more you know in a crisis, the better off you are, and remaining cool, calm, and collected is imperative. And since most of us tend to kind of panic, it's good to reinforce that with knowing, okay, I'm going to handle this calmly. And there's a book called Deep Survival. I don't recall the author, but I listened to the audiobook. And it was a really good book written by an ex-military guy who talked about how to remain calm in intense situations. And seeing what I'm seeing right now in the world, now I'm not thinking that maybe the catastrophe that comes, if one comes, will necessarily be external or some natural force, as much as we may have set ourselves up for complete failure with our fully automated systems, and not AI or necessarily, but just computers in general. Our high reliance on technology, on the internet, on satellite systems, anything could happen tomorrow. And so I guess this is to inform all of you to be prepared to. And hopefully you have some of the basic tools where if something happened tomorrow, thinking you could get to the grocery store before everyone else is, you really got to rethink that idea, because it's not like the old days where you'd see in the movies, everybody's racing to the store to grab as much food as they can. It would be gone in a matter of hours. I mean, there's no stock room in the back anymore. My son just got a job at a food distributorship for natural foods, where they sell to different stores, and I thought, well, how perfect. Now at least we have a place we can go and stock up if anything happens, right? If the store shelves are empty, at least we know the warehouses are. So knowing your local places might be a good thing to know too, and a good place to get away into the woods if you have to. But here I am, doom and gloom, right? No, I got a family to feed, I've got a life to live, and I'm not looking forward to a disaster. I'm just knowing that if one does happen, I'll be prepared. And hopefully you will be too. Peace out. Take care, everybody.